Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Chen, Mills Naeem, and I'm here to talk to you about the climate crisis. This video is called What to Do About the Climate Crisis. Yeah, you found someone who actually can tell you what to do. um, well, I'm just going to give you my perspective as a mother, as someone who became an activist, both for a lobbying group, a citizens lobbying group, and also for Extinction Rebellion and other groups, working with other groups to organize climate strikes, but primarily as a mother and as a human being who cares about life on Earth. So I'm assuming you are someone who cares about life on Earth and who may be alarmed by the massive raging fires across the West, the droughts that are happening across the Southwest, and in, for instance, Africa, South Africa, places where the water table is running very low, Central California, also in Cape Town in South Africa and around the world. We're looking at dwindling water resources because the water is shifting because of the way that climate change is affecting the atmosphere and where water dumps in huge amounts now in some areas and where water is drying out in other areas. And the reason I'm making this video today is because I am up in the Sierra Nevadas of California, and there's a huge wildfire burning about 10, maybe 15 miles away from me called the Tamarack Fire. It is 40,000 acres, not very contained at this point. And 2 days ago, I went to go hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail, and I couldn't go south because of the fire, so I went north, and I could see the smoke billowing up from the mountains. You can see that on my Instagram and my Facebook, a picture of the smoke billowing up from the mountains. You can't see the smoke right now. I'm actually on the west side of the fire. Watch out for the exposure here. I'm going to show you, I hope you can see this, the mountain range. I don't know if you can see that. Mountain range that's just to the east of me. The fire is just past that range. And when I was posting and sharing about my hike on the Pacific Crest Trail, I got messages from friends of mine who had family members who were, near the fires. Their car broke down. They had to try to get a rental car. They were exhausted. They had 2 children with them, trying to figure out if they had to evacuate or not. I was trying to figure out if I had to evacuate or not last night. I got another message from someone who said on my Instagram account, I've been in, some despair because of the floods in Europe that have killed over 100 people now, and the wildfires, and on and on. So, we can say things like, well, California needs to better manage the forests or whatever, and these things may also be true, but that doesn't deny the incredible amount of dryness and heat that's been happening up here. I can feel it because I come here almost every summer, and the meadow across the way from this condo where I'm staying, you normally has a creek that's pretty big and flows through like the whole meadow. You can't cross the meadow because it's full of water. That meadow is completely dry this year. It's the first time I've ever seen it like this. So what I'm here to tell you is that climate change is real, and anthropogenic climate change is real. That's human-caused climate change. The science on this is super basic, and the reason many people still don't believe this is because the fossil fuel industry for years, maybe decades, funded what's called denial science, often using geologists, because geologists aren't really climate scientists, to put out YouTube videos and papers questioning and casting doubt on anthropogenic, human-caused climate change. But back in the 1800s, in fact, I just heard about a woman scientist who in the mid-1800s was already wondering what was going to happen given the Industrial Revolution and all the greenhouse gases that were going up into the atmosphere. So this has been predicted for some time. Honestly, it's not rocket science. And we need to stop being in denial about it. We need to stop that. And we need to start to face what's ahead of us. And I know not just what's ahead of us, actually, but what's all around us. And I know that it's a lot because given how much we've been delayed on acting on climate because of fossil fuel industry denial, and I'm going to call out ExxonMobil, I'm going to call out Shell, who poured millions of dollars into the Heartland Institute. I call it the Heartless Institute. And of course, all the, research, quote unquote, and report on denial science out to the public so that people who are tied in with the fossil fuel industry, including fossil fuel industry workers and everyone, has kind of been a little bit guilty of wanting to believe that man-made or human-made climate change is not real. And we have to get over that or we won't be able to fix this. We have to look at it, accept it, and do what we can. Now, I know that accepting it is challenging. It was challenging for me. I first watched the sea stars, also known as starfish, dissolve in this little cove on a beach near my house about, 6, 7 years ago. And when I did the research, I found out that the oceans were warming, and this was making it harder for the sea stars to survive, along with the abalone. We have acidification of the oceans because the oceans are absorbing so much carbon dioxide and absorbing so much heat for us as well. Anywhere from, I've heard, 30% of our heat to 90% of our heat. And that's changing the chemistry of the ocean. That's, of course, impacting the coral reefs, which are bleaching, and impacting sea life everywhere. So, so this is hard to face. And I went through a period of grief, anxiety, fear for my children, fear for everyone's children, fear for all of us on Earth. Because the truth is, we will either not face this and we will see the sea level rise and the change in the intensity of storms, the intensity of droughts, the acidification of the ocean, basically collapse our industries for us. So either we figure out how to scale back our negative impact on the planet and our life support system, or the planet will do this for us. The planet will scale us back, and it won't be pretty, and it won't be fun. And already it isn't, because we've seen, there was an excellent PBS show I watched last night on water, the molecule we were born from or something. You should check it out. The Story of Water, I think it's called, on PBS, and you can get that on Amazon Prime. That talks about how the increasing droughts have actually impacted us globally, politically. In Syria, where there was a drought that created unrest and chaos, also in Egypt, and so on and so forth. So droughts and lack of water impact our food supply. Intense storms and flooding impact our croplands and food supply. The jet stream, which is becoming very erratic, and also, I believe it's slowing down and zigzagging in a very abnormal way, is bringing increased heat and also increased intense cold over the global grain belt. So again, I know this isn't going to make you feel great, so I'm going to try to give you my psychological perspective and some resources to help you with this, which is that when I was on the Pacific Crest Trail, there were wildflowers still everywhere, and there was still water, and we still have water, and we still have trees, and we still have forests. But what these fires are doing, it's like a huge alarm bell is ringing, and we have to pay attention. At the same time, as I was walking the trail, I just felt this deep love for this planet, deep love for the abundance of this planet and how much Mother Earth gives to us. And I know that farmers in the Midwest and hunters in the South and even people who voted for Donald Trump, who said that climate change was a hoax, I know that inside of everyone is a deep love of Mother Earth, whether that's through fishing or hunting or farming or hiking, um, or gardening, or just walking along the beach. This is something innate in us. And I had the honor of speaking to an indigenous friend of mine. She's an Alaskan native. And she had the graciousness to say, indigenous people are so well known for our connection to Earth, but that is something that is in all human beings. And that, in terms of what to do about climate change, that what occurred to me as I was hiking was that if we can connect to that feeling of love for Mother Earth and feel how much she loves us back, how much she nurtures us and gives to us our whole entire lives. We could not survive, of course, without her. She is our home, and she is our food and our water and our sun and our everything, our existence. And we are part of her. So the more we feel that, it's like if your own mother were sick, you would be taking care of her. If she were about to have a heart attack, you would be driving her to the hospital. If someone were attacking her, you would be defending her and possibly attacking back. So it is from that deep feeling of love, which we all have, I believe, even if we don't even know that we have it, because we haven't been outside camping or hiking or in nature for some time. I believe it's innate. And if we can connect to that and quiet down, then whatever particular skills we have, particular resources, particular connections we have, we can utilize toward the saving of our life support system on Mother Earth. Mother Earth will go on without us, but we cannot live without the life support system that she provides us with, including the waters, the temperate climate, which we've enjoyed for millions of years, which has allowed us to develop human civilization, and which we are now threatening, ourselves. So, I don't know if you know about tipping points, but tipping points are where we are now. And there's debate about whether or not we are going to be able to make it at all, whether or not we can reverse this crisis. And that has to do with the fact that the more we heat, the more we heat. And so, for instance, the fires are burning up trees. The trees store carbon for us. So we are losing what's called carbon sinks, places where the planet was holding and storing carbon for us. And by burning, the trees are releasing more carbon into the atmosphere. And of course, the fires are heating, so that's heating up this whole dry area and drying it out even more. So there's this sort of exponential increase in heating that is happening, that is starting to get out of our control. That's happening in Greenland with the Greenland ice sheets, which are melting. And as they melt, the white ice and snow retreats, and then the dark land or the dark seas are exposed to the sunlight, and then the sunlight gets absorbed much more rapidly and heats up, the Arctic regions, because we don't have that whiteness to deflect the sunlight, because white reflects sunlight back out, and dark colors absorb the sunlight and therefore the heat. Also, there's a lot of methane in the Arctic regions, both north and south. And as we melt the snow and ice, methane, which is a greenhouse gas that is actually more heating than carbon dioxide, gets released into the atmosphere. And that's already starting to happen, we think, because when the pandemic happened and we actually did, not by choice, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as human beings, there was still a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, more than you would expect. And that's measured at the Mauna Loa mountain on the Big Island of Hawaii. Actually, every day they measure the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Right now, we're at about, I think, 420 parts per million. Once we get to 450, scientists are saying that's the point of no return. So this is also why I'm making the video, because we are so close to the point of no return. Some scientists would say we are past it and we need to start to get ready for a lot of chaos, which we're already starting to experience. Now, I don't say all that to scare you, and I'm going to provide some resources to help you with your fear, but we have to act. And I can't tell you exactly what to do. But if you decided to do something, let's say you decided that you wanted to go hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail. Well, you'd probably spend a lot of time researching what you needed to get into your pack for the hike, how heavy your pack should be, the distance between one, resting point and pickup point for supplies and the other, and read a lot about all the different histories of people who have traveled the trail before. The reason I'm saying this is because if you want to know how to deal with climate, that's what you need to do. You need to do your own research and think about what makes sense for you to do. I'm going to offer some ideas. But one thing I want to point to is that the current system of endless growth neoliberal capitalism, where the stock market is designed so that actually executives of banks and other industries, fossil fuel industries, whatever kind of industry, are under the gun legally to constantly grow profits. We cannot have endless growth on a finite planet. And as much as people love capitalism, and I can see the value of capitalism too, the freedom, the imagination, the creativity, the sense of, being rewarded for your efforts, like that's all good stuff. But you have to start to think about if a system that we think is so great is actually about to collapse in on itself and destroy human civilization, like how great can it be? So I'm actually not sure that we need to undo capitalism, but I think we need to really figure out how to rein it in and have democratic control over some of the major systems, particularly the energy and water systems. And we have to have limits on what companies can do. We have to have costs built in. And we need to stop costs in terms of damage to the environment built into what companies are doing. And we also need to tax carbon. There's other things, but just I lost my train of thought there, but I will get back to those things. Okay, so this is getting longer than I thought. I hope you hang in with me or come back and listen to the rest of it. The point that I'm making is that we must shift human consciousness across the globe rapidly. And that sounds like a huge challenge. However, it's happened before. It's happened, when we moved from agrarian to industrial. It happened when we moved from heavily religious all across the world to more science-based. I am a spiritual person. That doesn't mean there is no God or there is no greater intelligence. To me, this whole world proves that there is. But we shifted as societies very quickly from believing in lots of different religions to being more science-based. We shifted with the technological revolution into incredibly fast-paced development of technologies, including like this phone that I'm recording on now, and people trying to get now to Mars and so on and so forth. But what we need to do now is shift to the spiritual. Or if you want to say the human spirit, that's fine with me. You don't have to be spiritual to love Earth and to love human beings. And it is that love that I call spirit, that great love that goes past our own individual selves. And that's something that we need to focus on now. And we need to think about, everyone at all levels of society needs to think about how to shift from a materialistic society, a technologically based society where we think technology will save us, to an earth-based spiritual society. Of course, we will still have technology and some of the systems that we still need, but we are at a tipping point. And interestingly enough, the Anishinaabe Indian nation in Minnesota that is currently fighting a fossil fuel pipeline coming from Canada from the Enbridge company has a prophecy. Now, I'm not a prophecy person. I don't go seeking out prophecies. I don't believe in all prophecies. But at this time, there have been a few native prophecies that have made sense to me. And I do believe that we need to turn to the native peoples of all countries, Australia, the United States, Canada, First Nations, and listen and follow, what they've been trying to say for centuries, since, colonization. The Seven Fires prophecy of the Anishinaabe nation of the United States and also into Canada basically goes way back, and it predicted the coming of white people to the United States, to this continent called Turtle Island, actually, by indigenous groups. And it predicted how things would go. Either the white person would come shaking hands, extending a hand, or the white person would come with arms. And the white people came with arms. And then that predicted the next prophecy, which was that the Anishinaabe people would go to the land where the food grows on the water. And I'm not the expert at this. You should look this up and listen to the tribal elders who talk about these prophecies. But I just want to share them with you to pique your interest and get you to look into it. So the Anishinaabe ended up in Minnesota, where the food grows on the waters, which is the wild rice. Now, they've been tasked with taking care of the earth. Most native tribes feel this way about the earth. And this is why we need to turn to them in our shift in consciousness and listen and support them and follow what they're doing. Not all tribal leaders, because nobody's perfect, but the ones that really we can tell have integrity and are making sense given the climate crisis. Now, what's interesting is that as part of the prophecy, there are 2 points where the indigenous groups and the white people can come together and work together and create what's called a great nation. The first time that happened, we blew it, okay? White people blew it by basically destroying indigenous populations across the continent. There were millions of people living here before white people got here. The second opportunity, according to indigenous leaders now who are trying to care for Earth, is now. And that prophecy says that the white people will have to choose the path either of increased materialism and technology and putting faith in that, or spirituality. That's the choice. And one path will lead to further destruction of our life support systems and chaos. And the other path will lead to a great nation that is sustainable. So to learn more about this, just look up Seven Fires prophecy. And interestingly, Winona LaDuke, who is a Native American woman, an Anishinaabe, was arrested, I think 2 days ago. I just checked. She was still in jail last night. I believe that was the 21st of July. We're in 2021. And she runs a group called White Earth Land Protection. White Earth Land Protectors. I'm sorry, White Earth Land Recovery. I had to find this in my notes. White Earth Land Recovery. And she is helping to lead the protest against the Enbridge Line 3 pipeline. The Enbridge Line 3 pipeline is very important to track around climate because it is symbolic of the fossil fuel industry trying to move forward with business as usual while we are literally in flames. This is an emergency situation. It's like being on the Titanic and having the captain consulting with his insurance company people or people who've put out an insurance policy and are standing to benefit from it if the Titanic crashes into the iceberg. And this is who the captain is consulting with. This is what's happening with the fossil fuel industry. So this Enbridge Line 3 pipeline is bringing oil. I'm not even sure if it's oil that's destined for the United States or is just processed here and then gets shipped out to other countries. through a pipeline that will run under the wild rice treaty territory of the Anishinaabe peoples. This oil is called bitumen. It's crude oil from tar sands in Canada. Tar sands is a special kind of hellscape on Earth in Alberta, in the province of Alberta, Canada. It is a wasteland. And the oil that comes from there, the crude, it's called bitumen. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, is something like, I don't know, 7 or 10 times more heating than regular oil when it's burned. It's very dirty oil. And these pipelines leak. They leak by the thousands. And we must move away from fossil fuels. It's true also that solar panels and windmills do take resources. We're in a bind. We're in a catch-22 because the more resources we extract from the land, the more we're also destroying habitat for species. But we don't have a lot of choices at this point. We're in damage control. We must stop burning fossil fuels. We just must. Okay, we don't have a choice. Or again, as I said, if we don't make this choice, Mother Earth will make the choice for us. And our industries will go down. Anyway, I mean, the amount of money that's going to be needed just to keep ourselves alive with food and with basic transportation systems is going to be so phenomenal that the debt that we see now in the United States is going to look like pocket change. Okay, so that's where we're at. I'm sorry, I know it's alarming. But again, remember, Mother Earth still loves us, okay? Go and get your good vibes from her wherever you can, whenever you can. And, again, we're just one planet. That's another thing that helps me. We're just one tiny speck in the universe. I had to realize that for myself in the midst of learning about the climate crisis, because I used to think that, and it was comforting, but then it took a greater depth of believing that and understanding that, given that the climate crisis is happening in my lifetime, which I don't think I expected 20 years ago. I just wasn't sure. I thought it was being kind of handled. It's not being handled. Anyway, so Winona LaDuke, look her up. The Seven Fires prophecy. There's also the Black Snake prophecy, which is about Native Americans, the 7th generation from when this prophecy started of Native Americans were to fight the black snake. I'm not sure where this prophecy comes from, but many young Indigenous people who are leading the movement against pipelines, and Indigenous women and elders, female elders who are also leading this movement against pipelines in the United States, they believe that it is their job to stop the pipelines based on the Black Snake prophecy, which is that the 7th generation of Indigenous people would be fighting the black snake. So I would ask you to begin to support these Indigenous movements against pipelines. It seems extreme to be a part of a protest, and yet we are putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than even a year before the pandemic. Nothing has slowed down. We cannot continue in this capitalist system consuming so much resource and wasting so much of what we buy. I mean, in the West, at least, in the United States, in the global North, in developed countries, how many clothes do you have that you don't wear? How much food do you buy that you don't eat? How much water do you waste just brushing your teeth, or washing the dishes, or putting your sprinklers on in the middle of the day? We are wasting so much still. And we could do a lot just by stopping all the consumption. And again, I know that jobs are relying on this, but we have to figure out a different way. We need to step out of the box in our thinking about our economies and how to support ourselves via our economies in all ways, and how to support Mother Earth. So there's something called donut economies that you can look into, which is about putting limits on economies so that they're circular, and so that human beings are supported in their physical health, their mental health, and the earth is supported in supporting us as well. So that's one thing. I'm just giving you some ideas now, and then you're going to have to go out and reflect in your own quietude about what makes sense for you. I have friends who teach the principles of Sydney Banks, the 3 principles that are about mental health and well-being and spiritual well-being. And I have one friend and colleague who just decided, I'm going to do free webinars, and he's done, like, I don't know, 50 to 80 free webinars in the last year or something, when normally he charges. And I respect that, because teaching the principles is teaching people how to let go of old thoughts and their old thought systems, and go into creativity and insight and solution. And that's what we all need to do. We need to let go of the way that we're attached to the systems that we've built, which are all based just on human thinking, and go into our hearts and feel our way into new solutions, which come as insights. We are probably going to need some kind of technology to draw down carbon, but the best technology is a tree. So the most promising solutions that I've seen have to do with reforesting, because trees are cooling and they absorb and store carbon for us, carbon dioxide. And if you get around a tree on a hot day, it's like a little air conditioner. This is what plants and trees do for us, is they help cool us down. Also, if we can plant more trees, given that we're running low on water, the use of water to plant trees, in my mind, is wise, because trees create their own weather patterns and they help to create rain. So we need to strategically be reforesting and also rewilding. There are peat bogs and swamplands and marshlands that we also need to store carbon, grasslands. Another really hopeful solution is in regenerative agriculture. What this means is we need to get away from industrial scale commercial ag and tilling, which releases carbon into the atmosphere. And we need to get away from the heavy use of nitrogen fertilizers and pesticides, which are running off into our freshwater systems and our ocean waters and killing off fish and wildlife all over the planet. There are dead zones based on all of this toxic waste from commercial agriculture. If you watch the movie Kiss the Ground, which is on Netflix, it's very hopeful around regenerative agriculture. So if you are someone who lives in the Midwest, if you are someone who farms or who can farm or who knows farmers or who is involved in commercial ag, there are big companies who are switching over to regenerative agriculture, and that means diversity of crops, cover crops, and no tilling. Also, mulching really reduces the need for water. And when you do regenerative agriculture, you've got all these species coming back to the fields. We've lost 90% of our monarch butterflies on the coast of California, where I live. And that's because, they say, of spraying and pesticides on the croplands that these butterflies fly over. Okay, so let's see, what else in terms of resources? Okay, we're getting to be almost at 35 minutes, and I wanted to make this like 10. So I'm going to provide you with some other thoughts. Citizens Climate Lobby is an organization that is advocating for a carbon tax. This carbon tax, which can be politically very volatile because people don't like to pay more for gas, although actually paying more for gas is a good thing because it will generate alternative transportation and less driving, which is what we need. But anyway, people can't always afford to take, or don't even have alternative transportation to take, and they can't afford to pay a lot more for gas. So Citizens Climate Lobby, look them up. They're a wonderful organization, and they're lobbying to pass a carbon tax, taxing fossil fuel industries and other industries in terms of how much CO2 they release into the atmosphere. That money then goes back to the American people in the form of a check every year of over $1,000, maybe $2,000 to help pay the extra costs. So that's a wonderful idea. I've been to the conferences and helped to lobby our Congress people with Citizens Climate Lobby, and they are very, very, if you're more of a moderate type of person, you're not an activist, then I suggest looking into Citizens Climate Lobby, the Sunrise Movement, Fridays for Future, which is the youth movement around climate led by, or at least partially led by, Greta Thunberg. I advise you to look into the White Earth Land Recovery Organization that was founded by Winona LaDuke. And I encourage you to look into the Enbridge Line 3 protests and all the pipeline protests going on across the country and support them. I encourage you to actually vote either Democratic or Independent, because the Republicans are much more what's the word I want to say, in bed with. They are beholden to the fossil fuel industry because they are funded by many times the amount in terms of their fundraising for campaigns than what the Democrats are. The Democrats do get some fossil fuel funding, and so has Joe Biden. So I'm not under any illusions about, the people in charge, but at least the Democrats acknowledge the crisis, and the most progressive ones are very alarmed about the crisis and are willing to move forward with very bold policies, which we need right now. We need like a World War II style mobilization, and during World War II, when we needed food and we needed people to ration things and cut back and sacrifice, we did that. We did that together as a nation. In fact, all produce that we ate, 40% of it came from home-based victory gardens that everyone was asked to grow to contribute to the food supply. And we are going to need to do this again. So growing food is another thing we can do. Stopping the use of pesticides and fertilizers that are high nitrogen commercial fertilizers in our gardens, in our backyards. Providing habitats wherever we have a little piece of earth to tend, whether it's even just a patio on an apartment building. Plant some plants, start growing food, see how that goes, because if it's true, as many scientists are saying, that we are going to tip, we are going to see a certain amount of collapse. And that means that we're going to need to know how to feed ourselves on a regional basis. There's a wonderful book called Down to Earth by a man named Bruno Latour, and he talks about how maybe caring for the earth is the way that we can start to unite as a country, in the United States, in Britain, where, Brexit was the big divider, but really tending to caring for earth and for one another, I think is something that we all can agree on. And so really becoming more regionally focused in terms of food, where you buy your food, if you can buy from organic farmers who practice regenerative agriculture, that's a wonderful thing to do because it shifts the money away from these large-scale corporate farms to family farms, really. And isn't family farms what, all the sort of conservatives are always supporting? Well, guess what? Liberals support family farms too. So let's support regenerative agriculturally based family farms. And that will take us a long way in the current climate crisis. Okay, so I've shared these prophecies with you, and what I'm asking you is, what is your prophecy? We can panic, we can freak out, we can go into despair, we can think there is no hope, but I know that if millions of people across the nation and this world rise up and put pressure on their electeds and put pressure on the fossil fuel industry and take their money out of big banks like Chase that are funding the fossil fuel industry, and put pressure on BlackRock, which is a hedge fund company that is helping to destroy the Amazon rainforest. As much as they say that they're moving toward climate solutions, they are still putting money into cattle and soy fields that are being installed where the Amazon rainforest is being burned to make way for them. And we need the Amazon rainforest. We're at tipping point with the Amazon rainforest. Speak out, what is your prophecy? That's what I'm asking you. Is I don't know what you should do specifically. I'm giving you ideas, but what is your prophecy? Finally, a last few resources. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I'm at Amy Chen Mills Naim. That's Amy with an I, Chen Mills dash Naim, N as in Nancy, AIM as in Mary. I have a Medium account where I posted an essay called Finding Lightness of Being in the Midst of Climate Crisis. I highly recommend that for people who are having a hard time dealing with everything that's happening in our world right now. I also get into politics there, and I've actually been working on an essay called What to Do About the Climate Crisis. And I was here to work on that essay along with a book project up here in the Sierras, and I couldn't get into Medium. And then I decided, I'm just going to make a video because people really tune into videos these days. So that's what I'm doing. But I will also be posting an essay on what to do about the climate crisis there. If you go to my website, www.amychen.com, that's Amy with an I, Chen.com, you'll find that I'm also a co-host at KSQD in the Santa Cruz, Monterey Bay area. And I'll be posting my shows there about the economics and how to change the economic system, which really goes back to our state of consciousness and what we value. Because, Jesus himself said, you cannot worship both God and mammon. You cannot worship both earth and money. So we need to start to figure out what's truly valuable. And so I have a recent show I did with Michael Mechanic, who's an author of a book called Jackpot, about how even great, vast amounts of wealth don't ensure that anyone is happy or content or fulfilled. Wealthy people have their own host of issues, and they're not necessarily, the most calm, collected, centered, and loving people on the planet. So we need to start to value that kind of consciousness, the consciousness of compassion and connection. So you can find, in fact, I think I linked to most of these things at my website, www.amychen.com. And I'm sorry this is a bit long, but I know we're in the midst of a crisis and that people are really looking for help. And I'm hoping that I have been of help because I've been through my own process. I joined Extinction Rebellion. I helped to co-found the local chapter in my city. And that's also a wonderful thing to do. Almost everything that we have that's good, we had to fight for. Women's right to vote, women's right to work, women's right to own property, indigenous rights, and the American Indian movement was a fight. The fight to get voting rights for Black people, the fight to end slavery was a war. Sometimes things are worth fierce love. So I thank you so much for listening. I just want to also add, I encourage support for women's and femme leadership, women's energy, feminine energy at this time, because it has traditionally been more cooperative and less sort of individualistic and like high achieving, collecting wealth, power, etc. And that's the kind of energy we need to shift to now. So vote for women, run for office, step up into leadership if you are a woman, or if you identify as a woman, or if you feel like you have that energy, even as a man. We need that now. We need to shift. We need to shift everything. And you can be a part of that because we share in this consciousness together, this human collective consciousness. And if we can change this quickly, we have a chance. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.